Hey guys, this is Kiri with Healthfully Rooted Home, and today I'm going to take you through a really informal vlog style video on how I meal prep my food for the week. Okay, so if you watched my homemaking series, my cooking schedules video, you know that I meal prep only components. I don't meal prep like, you know, all my meals for the week and spend an entire Sunday doing that. I just meal prep components. So I'm gonna talk to you about what I'm meal prepping today. Typically, actually, I will spread this out over a period of like all week, and I'll do like one thing a day. But lately I've been really liking getting everything done, whether it's cleaning or cooking, just pounding it all out in like a 2-hour block of time. Now, typically I would do this meal prep on a weekend when my husband was home and could help with my son. But for the sake of this video, I'm gonna try and do it during the week so that I can show you guys. Okay, so on the menu today, we have hard-boiled eggs. I'm gonna prep a bunch of those just for the week. Those are a great snack. For some protein, I can beef up a lunch with them. I can have them for breakfast. Lots of things I can do with hard-boiled eggs, so it's always good to have those on hand. Chopped carrots. I like chopping my carrots and having them all ready to go for my raw carrot salads. And I talk about my raw carrot salads in a couple of my videos, a couple of my pregnancy videos, so you could watch those. Some kind of snack. We'll see if I get to that. Sometimes it's, you know, gummies. Sometimes it's like some kind of balls. I don't know. We'll see. Rice. So I'll prep some kind of like starchy grain, like rice or quinoa. And that way I just have it on hand to add that as a quick component to a dinner. I need to make bread. Okay. So I need to feed my sourdough starter. Bone broth, pickled onions, cold brew coffee, and my red raspberry leaf tea, since I am pregnant and I'm drinking that like crazy. Okay, so let's feed my sourdough starter. I should have done that a long time ago. Okay, so when feeding my sourdough starter, I look for pancake batter consistency. I have what's called 100% hydration sourdough starter. So I will show you what that looks like. Okay, so I'm gonna show you guys how I make my cold brew coffee. I use this Purity coffee brand. I have an affiliate link below and it'll give you a discount on this. But this is organic, mold-free coffee. It's really important, guys, when you are drinking coffee, that you're drinking quality coffee that doesn't have mold. Now, this coffee is tested so that it doesn't have mold. We know it doesn't have mold, but all coffee that you're drinking, even if it's organic, fair trade, it has mold, which I am just learning about, and so that's a big deal. Mold in our bodies is never a good thing, and I think that we know, you know, about that, but I don't think that a lot of people know that it's actually in your coffee. So I get this Purity coffee. This is actually price-wise, I get the 5-pound bag. So price-wise, it's literally like the same price as the just plain organic stuff I used to get. So it's a pretty good deal. Again, I'll leave a link for that below, but my cold brew coffee is like the easiest thing ever to make. Because these come as whole beans, so I'll just grind these up, 2 cups worth of coffee beans, and then I mix that with 6 to 8 cups of water in a bowl, and I let that sit overnight. Now, the next day is when it gets a little tricky, because then you have to like transfer it to the container that you're gonna have the coffee, like store the coffee in. And then you have to put it through a fine mesh strainer, and you wanna make sure it's completely strained out. So I actually put it through a fine mesh strainer and cheesecloth. So that process is a little fussy, but actually starting the cold brew coffee is really easy. that ended up being just over 2 cups, whatever, it's fine. We like strong coffee anyways. So I'm gonna just add like 6 to 8 cups of water to this and cover it with a beeswax wrap and call it good. Okay, so that coffee, I started it in the morning. Usually I start it at night and then I just go to bed, and then the next morning I process it and put it into the jar. But I think I'm gonna do that tonight, which is why I started it at 8 o'clock this morning. So when I go to bed at 8 o'clock tonight, I'll do it right before then and it should be good. And I'll already be working on my sourdough at that time too. So yeah. Okay, so I wanted to say a quick note about the sourdough starter being in front of the oven or the stove. So I don't know if you know, but I'm sure you do. Right here, a lot of heat comes out right here. And so you don't want anything above like 100 degrees, I would say, coming in contact with your sourdough starter, otherwise it'll kill your yeast. So I turned that on. By the time it got up to 350, and I put it like way far forward. So I don't know if you can see, but this is like the edge. So it's like as far forward as possible. And then by the time the oven got to 350, it was very, very hot already. So I quickly turned that off. But now hopefully that gave it the jump start that it needed. My little trick to remembering to do my sourdough and to make my dough is just this. Hey Siri, set my alarm for 11 a.m. for sourdough.
I turned on your sourdough alarm.
Okay, so that's what I do. So regardless of whether I have a lot going on right now or if I have just sourdough, that will slip my mind by 11 o'clock and I'll be like, oh my gosh, I totally forgot to start my sourdough and now I have an active starter and no dough. So anyways, yeah, just a little trick there for you. Okay, so right now I have my coffee in a big bowl going, and then I also have some rice soaking in a bowl. And to soak the rice, I put 2 cups of rice in a bowl with like 4 cups of water. I don't even measure, it's just like however much covers all the rice and then some. And then a couple splashes of apple cider vinegar. So that's a way to properly prepare your grains, is to have some kind of acid. It could be whey from yogurt, brine from sauerkraut, whatever it is, with water. Soak them for at least 8 hours and then to cook them. That way all the anti-nutrients are kind of soaked out and it's more digestible by your body. Okay, so I'm getting ready to use up the last of my red raspberry leaf tea. I drink about 1 of these a day, which means I have to make like 1 of these a day, which I'll be honest, I really hate making this tea because it's like the fussiest process. And I don't know, I might just, after I'm done with the big bag that I got from Amazon, I might end up just getting the bags or something. It's just, I want to be drinking a good quality red raspberry leaf tea. And I know that this is a good one. It's organic, and that's good because these tea leaves aren't washed. They don't wash tea leaves before they package them up and send them to you. So you definitely want them to be organic. But anyways, I'll put a link to the tea below that I use, but I'll show you the process to make it. Also, I make the process harder than it needs to be because I specifically want it in this jug, but it could be easier. Like, you could find an easier way to do it. So I'll show you how I do that. I'm gonna drink this down, add the last of this, and then show you. Okay, so as you can see, I don't measure anything. I do one of these, which I would say is probably maybe a little less than a quart. And then I just put a handful and a half of this in there. I just do it so that it covers the whole surface of the water while it's in my Dutch oven. Basically, you're just gonna have to play around with it. I'm sure there's like a proper ratio, but just play around with it. I like mine really dark and really strong. And then I'll even sometimes water it down if it's a little too strong. So I just figure put a bunch in there and then I can always water it down if it's too strong. So what I'll do is I will put this in the Dutch oven and get this going on high so that it boils. And I'll set the timer for 15 minutes. By then it will have started boiling, and then I'll turn it on low, and then I'll let that steep on low for about 5 minutes. Then I'll turn the burner off and I'll let it cool down for like 5-10 minutes. Okay, so while that tea is going, I have some pickled onions that I need to make. That's really quick. Hard-boiled eggs, so I have the water boiling for that, and I'll tell you what my process is for the perfectly peelable hard-boiled eggs in just a minute. Okay, so while I cut up this onion, I'm going to tell you the process that I follow to make pickled onions. This is something I like to have on hand every week because they are just so good. We can put them with tacos or just basically anything. They're so delicious. So it's a half an onion, and what I'll do is put a 1/4 cup apple cider vinegar in a mason jar with 1.5 teaspoons of sugar. I used unrefined cane sugar, and then a 1/2 tablespoon of sea salt. And then I fill the rest up with water, shake it up, put it in the fridge, and they're pickled like in a half a day. So I just sliced thinly half of an onion for that, and then I'm going to take the other half and dice it, and I'll use that for something else later in the week. Okay, so I just started the autolyse process. Autolyse, I don't know how you say it, but basically it's where you hydrate the flours that you're using to make a bread before you add the sourdough starter. So I just started that process. And so all I did was I used my roasted garlic sourdough bread recipe. And most of the time I just am too lazy to add the roasted garlic, even though it's amazing when you do. But that recipe's on my website. So for that recipe, it calls for einkorn flour, but I didn't realize I'm all out of my einkorn flour. So that's a big deal. I need to get some, because that's mostly what I cook with. But I just used my all-purpose flour and I adjusted the water content accordingly. So if you are transitioning a recipe from einkorn to all-purpose, then just decrease the water content by about 20% and it should work. So that's what I did. I did a little math there. And so in about 30 minutes to an hour, I'm gonna add my sourdough starter to that hydrated dough. Okay, so now while my eggs are boiling, while my tea is cooling and waiting for me to transfer it to a jar, my coffee is steeping, and that'll be steeping for quite a while. My rice is soaking and my dough has been autolysing for sourdough. So it's good and autolyzed at this point, and now I can put my sourdough starter in. So my technique I don't know. Yes, my recipe online does reflect this. But my tip, number one tip for all sourdough recipes where you want to get a good rise is to put your sourdough starter in before you put your salt and have there be a delay of about 15 minutes, because what salt does is it starts to kill yeast. And so you want as much yeast to be activated in that dough as possible. So I will put my sourdough starter in my hydrated dough and then set a 15-minute timer and then put my salt in. I have found such good success with doing that. And so that's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna put the starter in and then 15 minutes later, I'll put the salt in. Oh, another note about my sourdough starter, or about sourdough starter. So she is pretty bubbly at this point, but I'd like her to be more bubbly. And I can pretty much guarantee that if I did a float test, it would not pass the float test. However, and I think this has to do with how mature your starter is. My starter is pretty mature. I have gotten successful sourdough loaves without the starter passing the float test. And so I just did it one day and I was like, well, I don't have time to wait. So I'm just gonna use this starter and hopefully the loaf turns out great. It did. I still got the same exact rise. So I wouldn't always necessarily go off of your starter passing the float test to make a loaf of bread. Okay, so I didn't film the execution of transferring the tea into the glass jar that I have because usually I don't have as great of an execution than I just did, but I think I'm getting the hang of it. So anyways, it ended up being like this perfect execution and I should have filmed it. But I'll show you the setup that I have. It's so silly. It does not need to be this way. I am just so stubborn and I want it in this exact jar. So that's why it's so silly. But this is the situation I have. So I'm sure you guys have some issues like this in your kitchen too, where you don't have the proper tools that you need for the job. So I have my fine mesh strainer, which strains out the tea leaves, but then I have my jar in the sink because definitely some tea gets everywhere. And then I have this canning funnel because that's the only thing that the fine mesh strainer fits on. But then I also have the proper funnel for this type of jar because this canning funnel won't fit on this spout. So I have to have both funnels, which makes it ridiculous. And it like teeters and totters. So then as I put the tea in, this, you know, slides everywhere and then tea gets everywhere. And, oh, and then I have to prop it up here on this cake stand because, well, obviously if I didn't have that there, you'll see this, well, right now it's not doing it, but it like moves around and will fall down and then tea is everywhere. But you see what I mean? Like that is not ideal. All right, that is my timer for adding the salt to the sourdough. So let's do that. Okay, so the salt is in here. And at this point, I'm done using this and I just start to use my hands for the stretch and folds. But again, this recipe is on my website. So if you just go to healthfullyrootedhome.com and search for roasted garlic sourdough bread, that along with a ton of other sourdough recipes will be on there. Okay, so to make rice, typically what I would use is bone broth just to add even more nutrients to it. However, I don't have any more bone broth, and so I'm making some today. So I used filtered water. I did 2 cups of rice that I had soaked, remember? And then I added 4 cups of filtered water. So after I add everything to the Dutch oven, I bring it to a boil. And then I turn the heat down just slightly to a low boil, put the lid on, and let that cook for 15 minutes. Take the Dutch oven off the heat, and then let that cook for another 15 minutes with the lid on, and then it's perfectly fluffy after that. Okay, so my strategy for making hard-boiled eggs is very simple, but it works. When you peel the eggs, the shell just comes right off. Okay, so I bring the water to a boil. I'm gonna set you down. I bring the water to a boil, and then I let them boil. That depends on how jammy or well done you like your eggs. I let them boil for about 8 to 10 minutes. And then I take them out. They're boiling the whole time. I never like turn it on low or put a lid on or any of that. I just let them boil the entire time with like boiling water. And then I put them straight into an ice bath. And then the ice bath will cool them down, and then it does something to where the shell just peels right off. And then I peel the shell under cold running water. Now that is what I think the key is the cold running water, because I have done a non-ice bath before, and although I think the ice might help, I've let them cool long enough. I think that the key is to just let them cool long enough so that they're not still warm when you peel them. But anyways, peel them under cold running water, and then the shells will just peel right off. So there we go, eggs are prepped for the week. I did 8 this week. Again, breakfast, snack, lunches, we use them for everything. Also, I don't know if you noticed, but I store my eggs in this mason jar, and I actually store pretty much everything in mason jars at this point instead of those Pyrex containers for a lot of different reasons. I just did a video on this actually, and I think it would have released last week. So go check that out. All right guys, we're almost done. My rice, I just transferred to the back burner with the burner off, and that has just 5 more minutes on it. While that has been going, I actually started cooking dinner. It was either between making a snack for the week or dinner, and I figured since I have the hard-boiled eggs and we have a lot of like cottage cheese and yogurt and stuff, I'm not gonna do a snack. Instead, I think my time is best spent making dinner for tonight so that I can just relax come 4:30. And so I have some taco meat going. I'm gonna make enchiladas. My number one tip for your meal prep days, whatever you're prepping, is just don't have any idle time, okay? So if your rice is cooking and it's hands off, you have 15 minutes and it's doing its thing, find something else to do. Prep, vegetables for the week, or chop up some fruit or something. There's always something you can do. Don't ever let there be idle time, and you will get so much done. Okay, so another thing that I do on meal prep day is I pull out meat for the week. So I am big on meal planning, so I always know what meat I'm going to need for the week. But even if you're not a big meal planner, just get a dish, put it in your fridge, and pull out a bunch of different kinds of protein and let that defrost throughout the week, and then you'll always have protein for the week. Even if you don't have a plan for what you're cooking, you won't have to scramble at the end of the day trying to figure out what you're gonna do about your meat protein for that night. So that's another thing that I do today. It takes 2 seconds. I put it all in the fridge, and then it does its thing. All right, so I'm gonna do a stretch and fold right now. It's 15 minutes after I put the salt in. So I just do my first stretch and fold, and then I'll do probably 3 more stretch and folds, probably 2 more stretch and folds after 15 minutes after each one, and then 3 more stretch and folds with 30 minutes in between each. That is all in the recipe though, online. But while my rice is going right now. I'm gonna get started on my bone broth. And so I'm using beef bones this time for the bone broth. Usually I do chicken bones. I have a recipe on my blog that shows you the whole process using chicken, but it's exactly the same process with using beef bones. So I'll show you that. I have a shortage on bones right now, so I really actually need some more beef bones, or just bones in general. But this is what I have. And so I'm just gonna do it with this, and basically you just, it doesn't really matter how many bones you have. You just fill the water so that it's like just covering the bones, maybe even with some bones still peeking out. And then, yeah, if you follow my recipe on my blog, it should come out perfectly gelatinous every time. And then beef bones actually come out even more gelatinous. So anyways, I'm gonna get this going. Before bone broth, I use an Instant Pot, and it's like the easiest method ever if you use the Instant Pot. If you don't have an Instant Pot, you could do it on the stovetop, and I think I give directions for that in that blog post that I'm referring to. So yeah, just put the beef bones in, and then, like I said, put the water just so that it's barely covering the bones. And then add a couple splashes of apple cider vinegar, and that's what's gonna pull the nutrients out of the bone. You don't usually need to use that much apple cider vinegar. It's just I was almost out anyways, so. Okay, so I have that bone broth going for 4 hours, and then after 4 hours, I'll set it for another like 3 hours. And then this is the perfect time to start. Actually, I usually start at around 3, but then I just keep it on warm all night as I'm sleeping, and it just stays on keep warm till I get up in the morning, and then that's when I will transfer it to jars or use it. All right guys, so it's the end of the day and I have 2 more things to do. I'm very happy with everything I got done today, by the way. So I just have to shape my sourdough starter, which I'll show you that, and then transfer the coffee into the jug that I want to store it in. Again, such a fussy process, but that's partly my fault, so. Okay, I'm gonna show you this shaping. Also, so you can see my sourdough starter, I did not use it when it was, like, it definitely wouldn't have passed the float test. It was just starting to get bubbly, and it's fermented this dough so nicely. That is evidenced by the bubbles that you see in the dough, those large bubbles. So beautiful. So I don't know. I don't know if that's just because I have a pretty mature starter. I'm guessing that's probably why. Okay, you guys, well, thank you so much for watching this meal prep day. I hope that this gave you some inspiration. There's a couple other things too that I sometimes will meal prep on a meal prep day. I'll sometimes shred some cheese if I need cheese shredded for the week, and I'll sometimes prep breakfast. Breakfast is the only meal that I'll ever prep multiple of, you know, like enough breakfast for a week. But I'm not doing that this week. So anyways, it all just kind of evens out and all takes about the same amount of time every week. I'm guessing hands-on time for all of this, it probably took me 2 hours. So thank you so much for watching.